Garrett's number 2 overall wide receiver. Who's that?
Garrett's number 2 wide receiver is Zay Flowers.
Zay.
Boston College wide receiver, 5'9", 182 pounds, 9 1/4 inch hands. He ran the 40 in 4.42 seconds. He did 1.53 10-yard split, 127-inch broad jump, 35.5-inch vert. Last year at Boston College in 12 games, he had 78 receptions, 1,077 yards, and 12 touchdowns, 12 rushing attempts, 40 yards, and no additional touchdowns.
I came into watching Zay Flowers tape a little skeptical. I typically don't love smaller receivers.
They got a wow, right?
Yeah, they
He's
got
also
a wow.
a little older.
He is a little bit on the older side.
He'll be 23 when the season starts, September 11th.
But watching his tape, first of all, was a joy. Where there was a lot of guys in this class that it was, I got to get through it. I got to get, 4 games or 5 games. I just got to grind it out. This was one of the ones where I found myself enjoying it and wanting to watch more.
I love those games.
And it's fun to have players like that. I think what we have with Zay Flowers is someone that has borderline elite movement skills. And I think that's what makes him such a tantalizing prospect for me. Because if you're looking at him purely as a refined receiver, you're going to be underwhelmed. He's not, obviously because of his size, contested catch is meh. Catch radius is not really
Good
there.
His arms are 29.5 inches.
He's not getting too far outside his frames just because he can't reach it.
He was bad at contested catches.
He was.
Yeah.
Bad.
He was.
This is his catch radius.
Right.
But all of that being said,
I'm not even joking. That's like 29.5 inches.
but all of that being
I
said,
think you're shortchanging him a little bit there, Rich, but all right.
Oh, good pun there.
all of that being said, even though his route running looked a little different than other players, it was extremely, extremely effective. He was somebody that was able to vary his foot frequency. He would change like his gait. It was a little unorthodox at times, the way that he would run routes and get open, but it was extremely effective. Like he got lots of separation always.
Yes.
And to be fair, to back up on the contested catches, like he didn't have a lot of those opportunities because he did get separation, but he actually did catch 7 out of 12 of his contested catches, so he wasn't terrible, like we said. He just has small arms, small hands.
He's just not somebody that we.
It's not how he wins. It's
No,
not
it's
how
not
he's
how he
going to be
wins.
Correct.
successful.
I just want to.
How about that?
I want to back
That's
that up
fair.
before
That's
I
fair.
said it was terrible.
He's never going to be a guy that when he's covered
At the NFL.
in tight coverage, you're not going to throw him the ball.
Correct.
Because he's not going to win a lot of those.
Yards after the catch, I have him as the best scorer in the class.
It's very good.
I mean, he can stop on a dime. He can make guys miss. I was actually surprised, for as much as he's not a physical receiver at the catch point, he is more physical with the ball in his hands.
I have the exact same note, which was it's odd for a guy that's his size to be that physical there and not physical at the catch point. Like it was one of those things that was odd to me and it didn't line up.
Yeah, it is a little weird.
So when I see things that don't make sense to me, I had to make a note. So I made the exact same note as that. That's so
Good.
that's
I'm glad we saw that the same way.
Yeah, that's something we're eye to eye on.
I have him as a 9.5 with burst.
It's in there.
A 9.5 with yards after the catch, 9 on quickness. So it's those types of movement skills. But even though I have a 9.5 for burst, he only has an 8.5 for speed, which is still very good. But I don't think he has elite top end speed. And I think you can see that in his 40. It was a good 40, but it wasn't anything.
I thought it was a really good 40.
It wasn't.
I mean, 4.42 is pretty damn good.
Sure.
That's really fast.
But he wasn't doing what Trey Palmer was doing and running a 4.32.
Well, yeah, but nobody does. It's just funny that like we talk about that nowadays, like, oh, it's a 4.42. Like 4.42 is so fast.
It's a very good time. But what I'm saying is, because what was his 10 yards play? This is the one I wanted to highlight the difference.
It's actually 1.53. So it's not impressive either.
Who am I thinking of?
I don't know, put on your tinfoil hat. You'll think about it.
I tried. You have no tinfoil in this house.
Josh Downs, 1.49.
Maybe it was Downs.
It might have been Downs.
Might have been Downs. That was surprising there.
He had 4.48 and a 1.49.
There it was. I knew it was one of these small guys.
Yep.
Anyway.
Next guy we're talking about.
But all of that being said, he did end up getting the second highest score in the class for me overall, a 76.68. The only other negative that I wanted to highlight, because I want to be fair on both sides of this, one of the things that did concern me was he could be knocked off his routes fairly easily. Now, he's hard to catch, but if guys made contact, if they impeded on his routes, he was not able to hold his ground and fight through contact very well.
So I have he's on the ground too much for me, and I think that comes from what you're talking about. It wasn't like he just slipped and fell. It'd be like a guy bumped him and he fell. And you got to be able to keep your feet. You got to be able to keep your balance in those kind of situations. And so I agree that there's a little bit of that kind of concerned. And at 5'9", 182 pounds, I think you're gonna have to live with that. But there are guys that at that size you don't have to live with that. So maybe this is all kind of painting a picture of a guy that you talk about unorthodox routes. And now I'm talking about him kind of getting bumped off his routes and falling over. Is there kind of like I don't want to make it sound too dramatic. Is there a coordination issue? You know what I mean? Like maybe he doesn't, maybe he's not a dancer. You know what I mean? Like you almost have to be a dancer to be a route runner, and maybe he's not a dancer.
In some senses, but the way that he can make guys miss and keep his balance just fine,
right,
he's an odd prospect. He's an odd prospect to cover.
Yeah.
I came away pretty impressed with Zay Flowers, but kind of hurts because he's 5'9", and he's 182 pounds. So,
which is better than we thought it was going to be. He actually gained a good amount.
I like the 182. I do like that. So, and the reason I say that is because I do like it. I'm with you. I like his tape, but I like Tank Dell's tape. But there comes a line of the historical data that said last year that when you're 5'9" or lower, the odds of you finding fantasy football success are extremely, extremely small. So, I mean, if you go back over the last 20 years and you look at I had Jared, I was talking to Jared about this earlier in the morning. He's like, "Well, really? I don't know about all that." And he literally brought up all the receivers drafted from 1997 or 2000, something like that on. I can't remember what it was. And he's like, "Oh man, yeah, you're right.
It's ugly.
Like the only ones that have ever produced, you're literally talking about Brandon Cooks, Marquise Brown recently, Wes Welker, and somebody else. That's it. And none of those guys put up 1,000-yard receivers. So you got to hope they're PPR guys. Literally, none of those guys do that. So will Zay Flowers break that mold? Because I'm with you. There's a lot of things he does well. I thought he got in and out of his breaks really, really well. I love the way he does that. I love the way he accelerates quickly. I like the way they consistently got separation. I like the way he got off the line. I like the way he tracked the football. I love him with the ball in his hands. I love that he never missed a game in his entire college career. And I love that he succeeded and he did really well with a really terrible quarterback because his quarterback sucked.
Yeah. It was bad.
But his size, it's not just his height. Like I said, 29.5-inch arms, small hands. He had a couple he did have some body catches going on there. Didn't love him, but not terrible. Again, okay. I'm not gonna knock him on that.
I was gonna say he wasn't a guy that I made a note about body catches on.
I saw some, so I put a note there.
Okay.
It said a limited catch radius. There's not a whole lot here to knock him on. He's a really solid player. I end up having him as my third wide receiver overall.
Yeah,
because I'm with you.
He's 3 or 4 for everything I've said that was kind of poo-pooing. He's my 3rd or 4th wide receiver. Yeah, that's what this body's
when it comes back to the tape, that's where he is. But I do. That's where it kind of got me in this whole thought process and gets me excited about talking about next week. Is okay, here I am. The whole thing is done, and I have Zay Flowers and Josh Downs as my wide receivers 3, 4, right in that range. It's and the odds of one of those guys hitting is slim, let alone both of them. So what does that tell me about his class?
Right. So how do you slot those guys versus a guy like we just talked about last, Jonathan Mingo?
Right. Cedric Tillman. I know you love, but Marvin Mims, the guys
even
the
Quentin
size.
Johnston. Even though we didn't like Quentin Johnston as much,
I literally said to Matt, and you weren't here. I said to Matt, and I said to Jared this morning. I was I completely understand now why Quentin Johnston is so high for some people. It's just because
it's the lack of other people to put there.
If you're gonna gamble, yeah, his hands are bad, but at least get the ball in his hands and something can happen. I might as well gamble on him.
Yeah.
And I told Jared, I was
I might be getting there, by the way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I said the same thing. I was like, I think I might have had Quentin Johnson probably maybe too low. But like from just a tape standpoint, I have Downs and Zay Flowers slightly ahead, but probably at the NFL after the NFL draft. I think Flowers might get the draft capital to kind of keep him where he is at wide receiver 3 for me, which will help because that increases his odds of being a PPR guy. Right?
Well,
I see different things on tape with Downs and Flowers. But
I do
ahead.
too.
Yeah.
they're very different players on tape. Yeah. The one thing that helps when you were talking about the guys that, you know, are so small, Brandon Cooks and Marquise Brown had very good draft capital. So, you know, if we can see some of these smaller guys with draft capital, I think that highly accelerates their odds of being able to hit.
And that's what I was saying. Like, I think Zay Flowers will get the draft capital.
I think he's a top 50 pick.
Yeah, I think he'll keep him in my wide receiver 3. I think Quentin Johnson will get bumped because of his draft capital as well when it's all said and done. I think like Josh Downs has the potential to go down a little bit, and like some of these other guys has the potential to go down. But at the same time,
I could see Josh Downs being fourth round draft pick in the NFL.
I can see
easily.
Really, you think he's gonna be that low?
Yeah.
I can see guys like Mingo, Mims, and Tillman getting bumped up, and even a guy like I took me and Matt. You were talking about it too, because it made me realize my error. Like a guy like Tyler Scott. Like when it's all said and done, like I love his upside now.
Scott, I mean,
way more.
Scott and Zay Flowers are the guys that I have kind of vying for 3 and 4.
Okay.
And they're just very similar players. I think Scott is probably even a little bit better at the catch point, and that's kind of where I'm trying to figure out how to stack those two.
I think he's a slightly more refined receiver,
Yep.
but I think for me, Zay is much more dynamic in the open field.
Yeah, he's
with
an
the ball in
interesting
his
prospect.
I agree. They're different with the ball in their hands. I think Scott might have a little bit more juice.
And where do you have Zay? Oh, Scott definitely has a little bit more juice. Where do you have Zay Flowers right now?
Zay Flowers and Scott are vying for 3 and 4 for me.
Okay.
I haven't figured out which one I'm going to
So the good thing going with Zay Flowers right now is he's in the same realm for all of us, right around wide receiver 3. I know he's wide receiver 2 for you.
2, 3, 4.
4 for you. Say call him 4 for you. Say Scott bumps him because of trap,
Sure.
whatever, and I have him at 3. He ends up as
Averages
ADP
out.
of 3. That's a pretty good ADP for this class. But again, I just want to kind of go back, like from a fantasy football expectation standpoint, or overall, that doesn't bode well for the class. Even though I like the player, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to overall turn into a guaranteed fantasy football success. We're looking for him to kind of become one of those outlier players. And we all know how much people have loved Brandon Cooks over the years, right? Even though you're talking about, and that's a receiver that's put up 1,000 yards every single year at the NFL, and you can always trade for him. So, and you're praying, you're literally praying that Zay Flowers could turn into Brandon Cooks. That's what you're hoping for. Like that's the ceiling you're looking for, which would make some people throw open their mouth. Me, not me. I'll
He's
have
been
Brandon
good at
Cooks.
fantasy football for a long time. So
Exactly. You know what I mean? So like
If Zay Flowers if you said Zay Flowers is going to be Brandon Cooks, sign me up.
100%.
Especially
you
in this,
can,
especially
you
in
can
this
make an
draft
argument
class.
for the top receiver in this class if you
Right.
knew for sure he was going to have Brandon
But
Cooks.
you understand what I'm saying? Like some people that make something like,
Yeah.
like when you say it like that,
And
like,
I've never been a guy that liked Brandon Cooks, but that's how down I am on this class of wide receivers.
yeah.
If you could guarantee me Brandon Cooks,
And that's what,
sign me up.
that's his ceiling. You guys think I'm wrong by saying that's his ceiling?
Not at all. I think he fits. Obviously, any of like the high octane offenses would be great for him, but specifically, like I would love him in a West Coast scheme because the whole goal of the West Coast is to get the ball out quick, get it in playmakers' hands, and watch them do their thing. That's part of why Debo and Ayuk are so good. That's more of a West Coast. Like they can get the ball out quick and then they let their players do their thing. That's what he does best. Is just get him on crossing routes, get him on get the ball in his hands and let him do his thing.
I wouldn't mind to see him in like I wouldn't mind to see him in with the Rams with Sean McVay.
Would love that.
That'd be a good fit for him, and that get me kind of excited. And honestly, speaking of the Rams, now they traded Allen Robinson. I would have we said this a year ago, but like Van Jefferson, a pretty intriguing prospect to go out there and trade for on draft day. For like you probably get him easily for a mid-third round pick,
Third, fourth. That's what I was thinking. Yep.
Van Jefferson kind of fits in that mold now. Like all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, Van Jefferson 85 receptions for 900 yards.
Yeah.
Like where'd that come from? He was a mid-range, like a low-end wide receiver too. Well, we've been literally talking about that for a couple of years now. Like that,
I've been waiting for his opportunity. I've got him stashed on a bunch of teams, and I've had chances to probably bump him off teams because I had guys I needed to move on, but I moved out the players
because this is literally an exact moment. And sometimes you see it, there's opportunity, but we'll know exactly what we have this year. If it doesn't come now, it's
not
never
coming.
coming.
right, and that's when I'll bump him if he doesn't come this year. So we'll see.
2 thumbs up, Zay Flowers next.